and welcome to the Hope Activism Institute. I am so glad that shifts that are happening in this nation, but in the midst of the shifts, we can never depend on any administration, but our hope is always in God. And in all of that, we often know that it is important for us to be able to be advocates. It's important for us to push for policies no matter what administration, so that our communities, so that the least and the left out are taken care of. And so the Hope Activism Institute is shaped to be able to help give training, practical training on how to be able to have an influence in things of policy and organizing and strategizing and in mobilizing. And I thank God for Community of Hope's Minister of Social Justice, Rev Leslye Dwight, who will be facilitating these online learning experiences, bringing in some of the top thinkers in the nation, actually in the world, on all things advocacy and activism, and helping all of us to be able to grow, to be all that God has called us to be. And so today I'm excited about today's topic is about digital organizing, and we've got an amazing sister who's going to be blessing us today, the Rev A. Kazimir Brown. And man, she is somebody. I'm grateful to God for her, grateful to God for her ministry, and grateful to God for how God is using her in this season and in this nation. So look, I want to pray, and I want to give it to Reverend Dwight and Reverend Brown so they can move us forward along our journey today. God, in Jesus' name, I thank you. I thank you, God, for power. I thank you, God, for strength. But most of all, God, I thank you for shifts. And God, in Jesus' name, even, God, as you've shifted from 45 to 46, God, even as you've got our wonderful sister as vice president, God, even as you've got all of that working together, I thank you, God, that you still need us to do our part. You still need us to do our work. You still need us to organize and to strategize and to mobilize. So I thank you for this conversation, for this teaching module that shall happen today. Let it be to your honor, to your glory, and bless your people as we get our communities to be all that you've called them to be. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen and amen.
We are out here fighting for women's rights because we believe that women's rights are human rights. We are standing up for issues impacting minority communities. We are standing up for the rights of immigrants, the LGBTQIA community, and we're standing up for the issues concerning environmental justice and justice in our education system. When we show up, we stand up, and we speak up.
Hi, my name is Rev Leslye Dwight. I'm the Minister of Social Justice at Community of Hope AME Church, and I'm here to welcome you to another edition of the Hope Activism Institute. Tonight's episode is entitled Power to the People. So if you're watching on social media, now is a really good time to hit that share button and let your friends and family know to come on over to see what we're talking about. But if you happen to be watching on any one of our television platforms, or if you're listening on our podcast, this is the time for you to phone and text a friend and tell them to tune in, because tonight we're going all in to talk about how we help you raise your voice in these digital spaces. That's right, we'll be focusing on digital organizing. So come on and let's chat. So here we are, and I'm so excited to introduce to you Reverend Kazimir Brown. She is an expert in the digital organizing space, and she's really going to come and talk to us about the whys and the how-tos and what we need to do to be able to elevate the issues that are important to us and our communities. You know, there are some issues that have been plaguing our communities for a very long time, and it wasn't until the use of technology that we were able to elevate our issues. Police brutality, for example, that wasn't a new issue, but it wasn't until we were able to use the cameras on our cell phones to help elevate our message about what was really taking place in our community. And what about our healthcare issues? You know, we have had access of issues around access concerning, you know, good healthcare, quality doctors, and really even addressing the disproportionality of health outcomes that take place within our community. All of that, we were able to elevate that message in digital spaces. So today we have, again, Reverend Kazimir Brown, who is here to talk to us about digital organizing. She is a native of the San Francisco Bay Area in California. She is an ordained preacher. She's a reverend in the AME Church, and she thinks of herself as a person who serves at the intersectionality of faith, politics, and community. So welcome with me, Reverend Kazimir Brown. Reverend Brown, how you doing?
This is so exciting. Thank you for bringing me on.
Thank you for coming on to really talk to us today and give us real insight into the world of digital organizing. So look, before we get started into, you know, that space, by the time that our viewers are watching this segment, we have a new president President Joe Biden. Inauguration has taken place, and we also have a new vice president, Madam Vice President, right? I don't know about you, but I'm really excited about that. Kamala Harris. Look, I wore my pearls.
Wonderful. Love it.
But look, I wanted to talk to you about the Biden agenda because, before we get started in this conversation, because a lot of what has happened and a lot about what has been put forth on his agenda has come forth because people have been organizing. And even in a COVID environment, they've had to use digital organizing. So, he's promised that people who make $400,000 or less annually, they won't see an increase in taxes. On his agenda, he is dealing with immigration reform, undoing some of the policies from the last administration, healthcare reform. He agrees that the system needs to be transformed. And so that is something that he'll be focusing on. There are so many areas. And can we just talk about, education and the canceling of student loan debts? Okay. Again, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that because I know that in many spaces, a lot of these issues that are being lifted up are only on that agenda because people have organized and people have used this digital tool, this digital organizing piece. Talk to me about that. What are your thoughts about this new administration and, how we've gotten here to where we're going with this agenda?
Actually, I think you really bring up an excellent point. And one of the really wonderful things that we're seeing is that the agenda is through the efforts of many conversations with movements, many conversations with community organizers, with digital organizers. And this is like a direct example of what a win looks like. A win looks like being able to have an agenda that you're pushing forward, and you're pushing it forward in such big ways that you're getting the ears of the next administration. And I know one of the movements that I'm part of, the Poor People's Campaign, like we've been having conversations and we can see our work directly a part of the next, administration's agenda, with many other movement work being a part of that conversation as well. So it's exciting to see your work kind of blossom and flourish in this way, but recognizing that that is just one of the first steps. Like the first step, yes, is getting to the ears of folks. And then the next step is to push forward so we can actually see it implemented and see it come to pass.
Absolutely. So why don't you just start out and tell us, for those of us who don't know what digital organizing is, tell us what it is.
Absolutely. So when I think about digital organizing, I'm a person, I try to think about the definition. So for me, the first thing that comes to mind is just organizing. What is organizing? And for me, I think about organizing being this opportunity for people to come together around a problem, around an issue, and bring awareness to it in the hopes of seeking a solution for it. So organizing is literally coming together, folks coming together, and it could be, as long as you have another person, you're organizing. Of course, you probably want a little bit more than two people, but a lot of work can get done. So we never want to discount the idea of having just we don't want to discount it saying that you need a whole bunch of people to move your agenda. You can do so much with the remnant of folks that are they have a clear focus and they have an agenda and they have opportunities to express their solutions. So for me, organizing is coming together around a problem, looking for a solution. And the digital aspect is using digital tools to push forward that agenda. So we can talk a little bit more about what those digital tools look like. But to me, it's just using the digital resources that we have to push forward solutions towards a problem that we're seeing.
Absolutely. So what kind of issues should we be organizing around?
The beautiful thing about organizing is that it can be any issue. It truly does not have to be limited to one thing. And I think that's really, and I see that kind of being the future of organizing, is that when we are organizing around work, we have access to so much information. And what we're seeing is that the issues that we care about, whether it is healthcare, whether it is poverty eradication, addressing systemic racism, police brutality, all those things, environment, all those different things, we're seeing that they have a tie together with one another. They're not isolated incidences. They're not void of having statistics that overlap. And, we can see that even in education and things like that. And so you can truly organize around any issue area that you want. And one of the biggest things to think about for organizing is to be able to identify what it is that you're organizing around. I know that might seem very basic, but it's actually can be pretty tough at times, because how we define the problem, how we're defining the issue is one of the greatest steps of being able to look forward solutions, look forward towards who are the people we should be getting that, to help us with this, who should we be addressing these solutions to, who should be a part of the conversations as far as how it's impacting folks, and how we should be moving it forward. So I would say it doesn't matter. You don't have to narrow yourself to one issue, and you also don't need to have you don't have to have an organizing agenda that has everything in it too. It's really thinking about what you truly care about, what you truly want to push forward, and then going with that and finding other people who care about those same issues and moving that forward.
As you were talking, one of the things that I was thinking about is that your issue doesn't have to be magnanimous, right? Like, I think when we think about organizing, sometimes some of the images that come to mind are these big protests that we've seen happen for a very long time, all throughout the summer, and historically. But sometimes organizing can just be gathering your neighbors together and
Absolutely.
dealing with some of the issues that are taking place in your community. It can be, working with an HOA. It could be, if you don't absent from that, it can be like if you're in an apartment complex and you have slumlords, right? Organizing your community around that. I want people to think about how they're able to engage on a personal level, because it's not always on that, scale of something like a major citywide protest. Right.
Absolutely. And so with organizing, it can be around local issues. It can be around your neighborhood issues. It can be around school districts, schools in particular. It can be city, state, country, international. I mean, the scope is as broad or as localized as you want it to be. And I think that is something to take in consideration as far as when you are defining the problem, when you're looking at the issues, to think about who does this impact? Does it impact people across the state? Does it impact people in a particular parish or county? Does it impact people in a particular school district? Does it impact a particular neighborhood when it comes to health concerns? And I really want to emphasize that when it comes to thinking about the scope of it, that you truly think about, when you define the problem, who's at the table? Who's at the table as far as who is this impacting? And are these the same voices that are coming in and helping inform how we're going out, how we're reaching out to people, how we're defining? Are you getting the voices of the people that the problem is actually impacting? And that might take a little bit of time, and that's where the organizing work comes into play. Reaching out to people, whether it's your neighbors, whether it's people across the county, whether people across the state or across the country. And the beautiful part about digital organizing is that we have an opportunity to potentially reach more people than we would have had we just been not using any type of digital resource as well.
Right. So talk to us a little bit about the how-tos. So I may off the break know what my issue is. In a climate like this, we can pick any number of issues. One of the things that's coming up the top of my head is this evictions issue, where, in the midst of a pandemic, yes, there's been a moratorium on evictions and foreclosures, but at some point that's going to be lifted. And that's something that's going to affect thousands upon thousands of people. And I bring that up right as just one example, but somebody else may be experiencing something different. But what's the how-tos of digital organizing? Where do I begin?
Oh, that's a great question. There are so many different ways. I mean, one of the ways, and I'm a big proponent of, seeing what exists already, see what organization, see what groups, see what communities are already doing that work, and seeing how you can get plugged into that work. I think oftentimes when we think about doing organizing, we don't have to think about, inventing the wheel all over again. A lot of times the issues that we see, other people are seeing, and they're experiencing the same way. And people have been doing this work for a very long time. Unfortunately, they're doing it for a very long time because the problem is not being addressed. And that's what that's what we're trying to move forward for, actually to being addressed. So do your research is for actually finding out who's doing this. So if you're interested in housing, look up, housing organizations, eviction organizations. How can I get connected with those who are getting evicted in a particular area? And you can define what that area is: state, city, county, however. And then if you can't find it, then that might be where you say, maybe I need to start something. And then get going about and literally just start having conversations with people. And I know in this digital age, that's reaching out on social media, that's picking up the phone and calling somebody, texting somebody, emailing somebody, and just asking, hey, are you seeing this issue that I'm seeing? What do you think we should be doing about it? Is it affecting you the same way it's affecting me? A part of organizing is literally starting that relationship building around what you're experiencing, what you're seeing as being this common problem. And I would say that is the first step, is identifying, where do you actually find your passion? Where do you find, what are you drawn to? And then seeing if there's other people that are also drawn to it. And if you can't find it, then you being that catalyst for it. After you do that, seeing what the efforts are, seeing, how they're approaching the different issues. And with digital age, and especially with pandemic, there's such a variety of ways that we can raise awareness to our issues. Now that can be through social media and all the different platforms that you can possibly think about. If you can record a video or put some text up somewhere or a picture, you can absolutely amplify an issue. So it might be social media. It might be, for those who are able, going out into the streets and protesting. For those who are able, it might be actually joining a digital community or digital march. It might be attending a digital program or a virtual program of something. So there are some first ways. Try to see if there's any programming. Is there any service? Is there any actions or meetings that are happening that are around the areas that you care about? And that's your opportunity to see who else is in that community of that's doing the work that you want to do as well.
Do you have any tips for if I feel like I'm in a situation by myself, or that I'm the only person that's going through this? Do you have any tips for how we can find people that may be experiencing like situations?
Oh, that's a very good question. I mean, the first thing that I'm thinking about is that I do want to also say, for digital organizing, we have to have a very real conversation that not everybody has access to the internet.
Right.
Not everybody has the same access to the internet. Not everybody has devices. There's still a technological gap and divide in this country and throughout this world. Yes, we have phones, we have tablets and computers. Not everybody has access to that. And so I do want to put that out there as being a very real barrier for people. So the things that we're saying is not taking for granted that having this is truly not accessible to all. And we could talk about access and things like that. But for those of us who do have access to the internet, do have access to devices, I would, start with what you have access to. So if you're on social media, looking up hashtags, like if you, care about a particular area, if it's, mental health, you can look up a hashtag of, mental health advocacy. You can go and do a Google search. If you can have conversations with your friends, with your community, with people around you, and ask them, hey, I care about this particular issue. Do you care about it? If they don't, do you know of any organizations that is doing this work? Do you know any other people who might care about this? See who's in your network that can give you insight to that first step to guiding you towards your advocacy community, I would say. And that is such a huge thing. And I really want to emphasize that, because it's that community, it's that advocacy community that is what is able to push forward towards solution. We cannot discount the power of the people. It literally takes just a few folks to come together and to say, this is not right. We want to change it, and to amplify that message and to see it actually come into fruition. And so I cannot stress enough, finding the people, sometimes just when you feel alone in it, I guarantee you're not alone. There is somebody out there that is caring about the exact same issues. And I know it can get kind of hard, but I would definitely start plugging in, if it's Twitter, if it's Facebook, if it's Instagram, we got Clubhouse, we got all these different, we got, Snapchat, we got all these different things, TikTok, and seeing, are there certain voices that are expressing similar opinions to how you're feeling, and then reaching out to them and seeing if they have any resources, and kind of doing it in that type of snowball effect.
No, I think that's great. And even, I'm glad that you brought up the whole digital situation where everybody may not have access to a device. But, old school, picking up the telephone and, phoning a friend, and just in having the conversation about your situation, I think sometimes is what gets the wheels turning, right? So building the empathy around the situation that you care about, and, just continuing to have that dialogue. You never know who will end up in your network. And one of the things that, I'll do sometimes, if I'm wondering like who out there cares about an issue, if it's just me, I'll put the question out on Facebook. Right? And I've been surprised about how many people have chimed in on a question that I thought, or an issue that I thought I cared about. So thank you so much for that insight. And the other thing that I'll say about that is that you're really piggybacking off of a lot of the pieces that we talked around last week in terms of advocacy, being able to clearly identify your issue, being able to do your research. But the piece that you highlighted that I really loved the most came when I asked the question about isolation. And you were basically like, if you can't find, another group that's out there doing it, do it. Be the catalyst, be the change. That's the whole reason why we're here today. And that leads me into my next question. In Maryland, there are a lot of things that are at play this legislative season. Our legislative season just started. We have a lot on the line to be able to continue the work that was started in the prior session. So, for example, education is on the line in this legislative season. Our governor vetoed the Kerwin bill, which brought equity to our justice, not equity justice, but it brought educational justice to our students and to our teachers. HBCUs were standing to be able to receive funding because they had been inadequately funded for years, and that went away with the cause being pointing to COVID. Police brutality is a big issue that's at play in Maryland. A lot of folks are putting legislation on the line to increase police accountability, but one thing that we know for sure is that we're going to get pushback from police unions around that. So what are some of the ways that people can begin to digitally organize around these issues or any other issue that's taking place?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I think about organizing, and whether it's digital or not digital, one of the first things that I'm thinking about is that, okay, if I can clearly see what one of the problems is, and I can be able to identify what that problem is, define what it is, next step, finding the community. And I really want to also emphasize that a lot of the times we are addressing problems that have been going on for a very long time. And so with that being said, we also have to think about our commitment to our efforts for the long haul, basically. Not saying that it's going to take us, as long as it did beforehand, but to say that we have to have some type of long-term commitment to see it through, and to recognize that as we're pushing forward for solutions, as we're pushing towards new paradigms, new worlds, new realities, that's gonna require a lot of different things happening at once. And I really want to say for that, when you start beginning the organizing work, you're identifying your problem, you're finding your communities. Next, you're thinking about your tactics. How are you bringing awareness both inwardly into your community and outwardly? And what I mean by that is that one of the things we're doing in organizing is that we are building our organizing power. So we might be starting with 5 people, 10 people, 50 people, 500 people. There is never a time where we don't want to continue to continue to build out that base and to build out that support. And that requires having some type of internal communication that allows us to learn and to stay up to date with our issue and to stay up to date with what's happening and to educate others that might not know what the issues are or what the problem is or what the solution might be. So there's always this internal education that has to happen, and you're hoping that in that internal education that you're building outwardly. In addition, there's an education towards the people that you believe that can help you with your problem. So part of one of the things in organizing is identifying who holds the keys. Who holds the keys to your solutions? And that can get trickier than some people might then realize. It might be one individual, it might be a group of individuals, it might be an institution. So being able to direct your problem towards the correct person or persons is a huge aspect, because if you're saying that you want, a change in funding for education, but you're directing it to somebody who works, in Parks and Rec. Obviously that's an extreme case, but you can see what I'm saying. Like, you want to direct it towards the school board or to those who are making the policies for that. And then once you have identified who that you want to be working with and who holds the keys, then you want to also educate them and say that here we have a problem. Now, some people might be aware of it, some might not be aware of it, but there's also an education of this is how we're defining the problem. This is how we're seeing the problem. This is how it's impacting us. And there's always going to be the education as to how it's impacting people, because oftentimes we don't know how it's impacting others unless people tell us. So educating the very people that hold the keys. And then afterwards, not only are you educating them on that, but then you're asking for certain solutions. We're saying, here's the problem. Here's what we think is a potential solution. And I feel like that's one of the ways that you can think about organizing steps. And then the back and forth, and I wouldn't even say back and forth, I would say it's like a cycle. It's continuous to have the conversation with the people that hold the keys, because that might change. It might be another person elected. It might be another institution that holds power over the thing that you want to push forward. So it's constantly trying to keep up to date with that. But it truly is, I would say the steps is identifying the problem, finding your community, educating inwardly and outwardly, and then seeing it through. And there's a lot of ways that you can amplify your message, whether that's through social media, whether that is actually attending. A lot of these institutions and people have meetings, and they used to be at, during work hours and you couldn't get to them. Now it's at the click of a button. If you have a Zoom link, you can attend, these meetings very quickly. And so you can be a part of having those conversations in new ways. Yes, it can be going out in the streets. Yes, it can also be writing op-eds, writing newsletters. And I would also not discount, and I would say all those are tools that should be utilized, not just one exclusive, we're only using social media, we're only using op-eds, we're only attending meetings, writing letters, signing petitions. All those tools I would recommend being used, and maybe not all at once, but at strategic times.
Right. I'm going to give a really good example of what you just kind of wrapped up for us in terms of, power building and knowing who's in power and information, informational awareness, I guess, building that awareness around your issue. In my community, we were having an issue probably around the summertime. It was a public safety issue, right? We were having all sorts of things going on. At first, it was the ongoing fireworks. Some of you will remember that, well after the 4th of July, the fireworks kept going all night long, right? But then the fireworks issue turned into drag racing issues. And the drag racing issues turned into, now we're seeing petty thefts in our community. It was an ongoing public safety issue. And one of the things that, I did, my community doesn't have an HOA. And I was able to reach out to my community through a message board. So some of you all might remember, or you guys might have access to Nextdoor. And this is a good way of trying to figure out who shares your concerns. Well, when I went on Nextdoor, and I was like, has anybody noticed? Has anybody seen this? And all of a sudden, there's a flood of people that are talking about what they're seeing. And now you've built a community around your issue. And so we went from talking about it to doing something about it. From there, we did just what you talked about. Our community doesn't have an HOA, and we called together a Zoom meeting with our community police officer. And, our community police officer educated us with some of the limitations that, he was experiencing. That feeds into directly you talking about knowing who holds the keys and who holds the power. So what did we do? We called our state delegate, and our state delegate jumped on a Zoom call with us, and we, talked through our issues. And our state delegate was like, well, that's cool, but some of these issues I can't do anything about either. And so these are the people that you need to bring to the table, and my office is going to help you. And so as this process is moving along, we're coalition building, right? Bringing the necessary partners and the stakeholders together so that we can resolve an issue in our community. And the reason that I took the time to walk through my lived experience is so that people understand that it's the power of the people, like you said. It only takes one person to make a difference in a community. Because we did that, we started to see our crime numbers drop down. We started to see the calls for service drop down. We still have a lot of work to do, but it was the power of one person just reaching out to other people saying, is anybody else seeing what I'm seeing?
Yes.
Let's do something about it, right?
Absolutely.
So
I love that example.
Thank you. So I want to ask one more question. Let's talk about the tools that are necessary, because what happens if I'm not social media savvy? What kind of tools are available to me to be able to engage in this work of digital organizing? Great question.
So once again, that goes to access. And I also want to say, as you're building your community, your advocacy community, and finding that for yourself, to be mindful that as you're building power, that your community is probably going to have different needs. So to be mindful, there might be language needs, there might be interpretation needs, there might be visibility needs, and not all platforms are compatible with that. So I just want to bring that up too, because oftentimes when we think about a community, we might think about a community that can communicate with us in the ways that we're used to. But what I'm seeing is that we have people speaking different language. We have people that need interpreters. We need people that need bigger fonts, that have audio, that have text and captioning. So to be mindful of the access that you're providing, and if you're not hearing that being expressed in your community, to ask your community, hey, is everybody comfortable using these platforms? Do they meet the needs? Can everybody access them? And if not, maybe finding a couple different ways to build that base. So I just want to put that out there, because that goes to the tools that we're using. And so when I think about the tools that you can use, even if you're, quote unquote, not tech savvy, I would say that it is never too late to learn a different platform. And we're constantly seeing that. We've seen that, especially in the age of COVID. I mean, how many of us were using Zoom before COVID? Some people were. Not a lot of us were. And that was a learning curve. And it's still a learning curve each time they put out a new update for it. And you think about these tech platforms, they're being updated. They're changing their user faces. They're changing what you have access to. And I feel like one of the things that we can do is to see it as not being a barrier, as far as like, oh, I'm never going to know this platform, I'm not really good at it. And see it more as everybody's learning it at the same time. Everybody is going through a different learning curve, and not to let that be a barrier. Like, if you're not comfortable with somebody, find somebody who is. Take some time to learn it for yourself as well. And don't hesitate and think that everybody else has it figured out. They don't. They absolutely don't. And use that as an opportunity to also build your community as well. So I just want to put that out there for those who are like, oh, I'm not tech savvy, I can't really do anything. I would say you actually are more savvy than you think you are. And then don't see that as a barrier to not learn new things too. On top of that, there might be some platforms and certain things that you feel very comfortable with. Go with that. I know that when we've done text banking or phone banking for different, getting out the vote, or, asking people if they're interested in X, Y, and Z, some people are more comfortable with picking up the phone and having conversations. Other people were like, I'd rather just text a person. That's fine. Know what you're comfortable with. There's other people who are saying, I'm more comfortable, writing letters, and mailing them, or sending an email. Finding out what you're comfortable with, or what your also what you have time for, because let's be very real, organizing takes time, and knowing how much time you have to give, and not to think that for those who that's their life's work and getting paid, that's wonderful. But a lot of the organizing efforts is coming from folks who have 1 or 2 jobs, and they're caretaking for children or for elders or for themselves. And they're doing it in the midst of everything else that's happening in their lives. So recognizing that the time constraints are very real. But so that sort of might help gauge what you might be able to participate in or not participate in, and realize not one person has to do everything. That's the beauty of organizing, is that you have many folks being able to help fill in the gaps when somebody can't do one thing. And it shouldn't ever rely on just one person having to do everything. Everybody should be able to do a couple of different things to fill in. And so some of the resources you can use is, yes, having Zoom is a very popular one, being able to access that. There is opportunities for signing petitions. And now I know we've heard Activism, but clicking a button and signing a petition, that's powerful. You can get hundreds and thousands of people to click a button, and then you have hundreds of thousands of people backing a particular priority, backing a particular agenda. If I would say, another way is to find the numbers of your representatives, whether that is your local representatives, whether it's your state ones, whether it's your federal representatives. Find the phone numbers of their offices and call in. If you have an issue that can be addressed, and I love that you said that some of the people that you asked, they're like, I really can't help you with this, which is good to know what people can and can't help you with. And then also they said, oh, but I can help you find the person. So you might reach out to an elected official or somebody you think that might have the keys, and they're like, oh, I'm actually not the right person. Well, find that other person, get on the phone, leave a message. It is extremely powerful. They have aides, they have people working in their offices that are literally, their job is to find out, what are my constituents saying? What are the issues that keep coming up? And they work for the people. So if you have enough people calling in, if you have enough people writing letters and sending in emails and bringing that to attention, it's in their best interest to listen and to reach out. So I would definitely use those as resources for people to utilize. Social media, if you see something that you want to amplify and get people to help support or to turn out numbers in a virtual event, that's extremely powerful. That has impact, that you're able to, then use that number and say, hey, we had, this many people attend our event. You want to listen to us because we represent all these different groups. So there's so many different ways digitally that you can get involved. And then, the ways that, listening to the radio, listening to podcasts, listening, what's happening on the news, all that feeds into not only information sharing, but ways that you can also feed back into yourself and help shift that narrative as well.
Right. So there are 2 things that I want to add to what you said. One of the things that you find sometimes in doing your digital organizing and your networking is that a person may not be able to resolve your issue, but they may have influence in getting you to the person who can resolve your issue.
Absolutely.
So don't underestimate the power of continuing to tell your story and then continuing to network so that you can get to the right space. The other thing that I wanted to kind of highlight as a tool, because on social media, everything is about graphics. And you may not be a graphic designer to help get, design something to get your message out, but Canvas is a—
oh my goodness, how could I forget Canva? Yes, absolutely.
And I would also say poster my wall, where they have templates of things that are already done, and you just go ahead and you put in your information and they'll size it for you for whatever social media platform you want, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, so you don't have to have $1 million team around you, but you have some free access to tools right at your fingertips. And we will post that information later in our broadcast. But some of the tools that you talked about in terms of contacting your legislators are available to you already if you visit www.hiphopenation.com. go to our recent articles section and you'll see our resource guide for advocacy. And in that guide are already listed the contact information for your legislators, whether they are your congressional leaders or your state leaders or your local officials. So thank you for bringing that up. So our time is almost to an end, and I wanted to ask you a closing question. Give us a feel-good story. Tell us about a time that digital organizing has actually worked for you and you got the win.
Absolutely. And before I answer that, I also want to lift up for organizing. We hear a lot about like getting research to back what we're saying and using our voices and our stories. And for our artists out there, oh my goodness, we need y'all. We need art and movements. We need art and organizing. So if you're a singer, songwriter, poet, digital artist, collager, what have you, we need that as a part of lifting up the message. So when we think about messaging, it's not just, words on a page and maybe different fonts, what have you. It is picture. It's something that gets people to feel what you're trying to convey. So I absolutely want to lift that up, because some of the things, it might be too wordy to put it up, but you capture a picture and you're like, wow, I see it, I understand it. And it might even draw people in even more so. Because what especially in organizing work, we're addressing issues that make us feel something, that pull on our heartstrings. And we absolutely don't want to ever disconnect the real lived experiences that are connected to the very things that we're trying to help change for the better. So I absolutely want to lift that one up as well. A feel-good story, oh my goodness. In the digital organizing space, I think there's, and I think I would say there's many, but I know we're also in a paradigm where there's a lot of things shifting. For me, I would say one of the things that I'm part of is the Poor People's Campaign. And what we saw for our June 20th, we had a mass moral march. This is something that we would have had in person in DC, bringing, hundreds of thousands of folks, to the nation's capital to bring forth what our policy agenda is, what we care about, uplifting, the 5 interlocking injustices that we're, trying to change. And when COVID happened, that was just not available. It was not safe to bring people out. It was not safe to bring people together in, big crowds. And especially earlier on, we had even less information. And so one of the big wins was that we transformed something that was supposed to be in person to completely digital. Mm-hmm. And with that digital platform, we got, close to 3 million people to join online.
Wow.
To lift up, not just here's the facts around the issues that we, that we're trying to address with systemic poverty and racism and ecological devastation and the war economy and religious nationalism. Not only did we talk about those things, but you heard the voices in which it impacted. So it wasn't just a whole bunch of numbers of like, every dollar of your taxes, 53 cents goes to, defense. It goes to a war economy, not social programs, war economy. It's like, oh, well, that hit home, and that, I can register it here. But then when you hear the voices, I'm a mother and I work a job that pays me less than $4 an hour.
Right.
You're like, whoa. That's completely different than just reading it. Yeah. And then when you also mix that with, we had theomusicology and cultural arts. So we had song, we had poetry. When you bring that all together, it was just such a pivotal moment where you said, wow, we can bring together millions that probably might not even come together because they might have had the resources to come to the Capitol, or they might have been able to get time off for their job, or it might not have been on the radar. But because we had a digital presence, we were able to reach so many more people perhaps than we would have even in person. We don't know. What we do know is that there's 3 million people that came together around an issue that was supposed to be in person and now is completely digital, and we're still moving forward in it. And I think that's a huge win. And we're still seeing how the narrative that we pushed forward in the summer has now taken shape in this new administration, and we're going to continue to push that forward. So I would definitely say that would be a big win for the digital organizing community as well.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. That's the power of storytelling and getting people to come along in its basic form. Listen, where can people find you?
So I would, of course, ask people to check us out on the Poor People's Campaign. That's a movement that I'm, deeply care about, deeply moved, and we definitely need more people to be plugged in. There's state campaigns that you can get plugged in. And we're launching these 14 policy platforms that are really exciting. A lot of things that you mentioned are on there too. So definitely check us out at www.poorpeoplescampaign.org. And then, that's probably one of the biggest ways that you'll find me there. My work is very much there. I'm in that community. I have social media, but I'm more present out with the Poor People's Campaign. So that's where you can probably find me the most.
Perfect. Well, look, this conversation has been a rich conversation, and I just believe that this is going to be transformative for so many people out there watching today. Thank you
for having this. This is such a wonderful thing. This is exciting. I'm really excited when you told me about this. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you to our pastor, Reverend Tony Lee, for encouraging us and in creating this space really for us to have this conversation. Because if you walk away with nothing else from this conversation, is that the power belongs to the people. The power is in the people. This conversation today, married with the conversation that we had last week, advocacy and digital organizing go hand in hand. They are both tools in your tool belt to get engaged in this activism work. You don't have to have a $1 million budget. You don't have to belong to a mega church. You just have to have the passion to go after the change you want to see. So thank you so much for joining us today. We hope that you follow us again next week, because we'll be back to continue this conversation next Thursday at 7:00 p.m. Have a great evening, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Bye.